means from or source of, and I'm projecting from my throat. And I see a mem right here, right in front of me. You should see it in this hand, and if I hold it just so, you will. There's the mem. And I think most people who know the letter mem will see the silver mem right in front of them. Just clip off the side a little bit here. Yeah, there you go. It's hard to turn against the camera. So here's my mem, which means from. And after all, we're talking about speech, so it's projected from the throat. Nun, if you look, means to connect, the neck, the nexus. And I'm going to see a perfect nun when my hands are on both sides of my neck. The nun I see is this line here. And the nun you can see is very simple. It's this big, well, let's get it square onto the camera. It's this big loop. This is the vertical part, and there's the horizontal part of the nun. And if you put it against your throat, you'll see it quite clear. You almost have to look through the back of your hand. Now, samek means to support or to sustain. It looks a little like an upside-down mem in the Rashi Nachmanides version. And when I make the cradling gesture, I see the samek in my right hand. And I'll show it to you in my left hand when I take my hand out of the way. But I'm seeing a samek cradling in my right hand now. And the camera should be able to see the samek if we line it up properly. Let me get this confusing one out of my hand. And the camera should see the samek. If I get, there it is, right there. And if you look on your chart of Rashi Nachmanides letters, you'll see the samek shape. So I've gone from mem to nun to samek. Now ayin means eyes, sight line. And again, the ayin is right here. Put my hands alongside my eyes like blinders on a horse. And in my right hand, I see the letter ayin. And you can see quite clearly the letter ayin in my left hand. Getting the angle right may be a little tricky for the camera. Let's see if we can do that. No, I have a problem tipping it. Something like that gives you an ayin shape. You can, most people who know the ayin will see it there. There it is. Very good ayin. Okay, right here. Pei means mouth, to swallow or to engulf, to puff, to gulp inward. I see the pei in my right hand when my hands point towards my mouth and allow this projective out of the mouth motion. And you should be able to see a pei over here. And I don't know if we can get that easily. It's going to be upside down and backwards because from this view, so you won't be able to do that easily. So you won't be able to see the pei too easily until we do it in the computer simulation. You'd have to sort of come down under and look up at it into my mouth to see it. After pei, mouth, is tzadi, righteousness. Tzadi is apparent when you pull your hands up and tip them back like this. And I can see the tzadi wound around my thumb in my right hand. Now, I think this is sort of the clean hands gesture or something like that, where you're showing the backs of your hands are clean, you're holding them up. It's a kind of purification holding form. And I think I can show you that tzadi. This is the Rashi Nachmanides tzadi right over here. And if you cut it off at about this point, you'll see it quite nice version of one. Just look on your letter charts. Okay. Kuf is a skull. If this is tzadi, I want to define my skull. It's up at the top of my body. And I'll go like this. And then I'll see a kuf in each of my hands. I mean, actually, I see it in my right hand, and you might see it in my left hand if we looked at it properly. There we go. You have to look at the table to do that, I think. So I've got tzadi, kuf, then reish is to radiate from the forehead, the head to radiate, and so I see a reish in my right hand, and you should see one right here in my left hand. In fact, there's the reish. There's the reish, right up against my forehead. Sheen is to shine, so I'm going to use my hands to block the light of the sun or to radiate from my head, and I see a sheen in my right hand, the Rashi sheen. The angle is wrong for you, but if you were looking at it from into my eyes, you'd see the Rashi sheen in my left hand. And then if I come straight down, I get tav. It's an upside down, backwards kind of olive, sort of a backwards olive, and it means points back to myself. Again, tav on our chart means itself, selfness, self-reference. Now let me go through it again, and I'll say them another time. Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yud, Huf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samech, Ayin, Pei, Tzadi, Kuf, Resh, Shin, Tav. I'd like now to share with you a few additional ideas as to what this form has been identified with and show you a few other odds and ends about it that I didn't get to a little earlier. It's a hand. We know that. A general projective principle. We talked about that at the beginning. What we have is a flame of consciousness and a reflector. We have a sun, a star of seeds in the middle of a fruit, and a moon, a crescent surrounding it. We have, if you remember, there's a description of Torah on one foot. This is the 1 foot, and this is not a golden mean spiral, but it's a golden rule function, which is more fundamental than a golden mean spiral. And so that's Torah on 1 foot as it's come down to us. Rabbi Hillel is quoted as saying, when challenged, the emperor wants to know what Torah is, tell me why you're standing on 1 foot. Rabbi Hillel says, don't do to anyone else what you wouldn't want them to do to you. Go and study the rest as commentary. And that's come to be known as Torah on 1 foot. This is an expression of that self-embedding principle. Don't do to anyone else what you wouldn't have them do to you is another statement of self-embeddedness. You could take this to be related to Plato's allegory of the cave. Here is the cave part, here is the light, and the human plane is in here, in between. And we see reflections on the cave wall from the light. I mentioned Aladdin's lamp. Obviously the flame and the reflector. An interesting aspect of this, which I haven't mentioned before, is that while it's a hand on one hand, notice my thumb is coming up where the stem would be. If this were an apple, I've got half an apple here, the stem would be up on the top. If I grasp it in my left hand, and remember, there is a stem coming out here, then it is the scabbard and hilt of a sword, which shows up in some of the mythology of some peoples that have made use of these models. Also, you can see why you'd get scimitar forms because of the sculpting of this, and people could interpret it as a scimitar. If you look at some of the ancient Egyptian iconography, you'll find Horus hawk shapes and other bird shapes, and I think if you look at this form from certain angles, you'll see how its outline is very hawk-like. This would be the beak. If you also look at some of the iconography of ancient Egypt, you find what the archaeologists call the double crown of Egypt on the pharaoh's head. It's a combination of upper and lower Egypt in a dual crown. If that upper and lower is just a slightly off translation, and upper is really inner and lower is really outer, then we have inner and outer, and we have a dual crown with a conical section in the middle and a round surround on the outside. Properly stylized in the Egyptian style, this would be the double crown of the pharaohs of Egypt. Why would it be on their heads? Why do we put turbans and headdresses, scepters on the top of poles? Why in the Eastern teachings is there a 1,000-petaled flower that blossoms in the mind, a golden flower? Because what you put on a priest's or a shaman's or a teacher's or a king's head is an attempt to express the consciousness that's going on inside that head. And if the person on the hero's journey up Mount Olympus, up Mount Analog, up Mount Meru, from the plane of earthly existence up towards the transcendental peak in 7 stages, identifies with the hero, then this process unfurls in their mind's eye. The same meditative process as the mythological hero's journey. It's not a mythology, it's the record of a meditation in narrative form, and this is the form.